Oh, welcome to Small Town Times. I have Dave Thompson with me today, so it's a Dave and Dave show again, but just a different show, a different Dave, actually.
Less hair.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's true. Less hair. And we're going to talk about a couple of things, local, of course. We're going to talk about the passing of George Maroosis and the old-style politician that he represented, right? And a few other things. Of course, Dave was chair of the Near North School Board when it amalgamated and made some changes. We're at Chippewa. There's a lot of discussion about Chippewa. There's fences going around Chippewa. So I want to ask him right out, do you wish it would have been Widdifield instead now?
No, actually. Well, thanks. I'm glad I'm on this side of the mic. I'm not a target of you anymore, so that's nice to be on this side. It's been interesting watching the evolution, of this, and the ARC process. First of all, closing schools, no one wants to do that, but it's of the time, it's a statement of the community.
Yeah. Right.
So North Bay was not immune to it. So. Yeah, choosing a high school. Yeah, I got a lot of flack because I went to Chippewa, but it's the site, it's not the school. Yeah, and people have to remember that. You can't add on to the Widdifield site, and if the city was going in the wrong direction, one high school would have been the ideal situation, and so the Chippewa site, not the school, the site would have been ideal. So it's interesting to watch the evolution from when the ARC process was formed and the Widdifield parents were part of the, they were obviously part of the discussion. And one of the things that they wanted, and the board of the time said, you have to look at rebranding the two schools. You're bringing two schools together. You have to look at the branding. There was no talk about changing the name or other things that have come into the play. It was simply, you've got to look at rebranding it. And that involved the community, the teachers, and the students of all Widdifield and Chippewa families. Right. And so it's interesting. I always said from day one, Chippewa Wildcats. Yeah. That would have been a simple solution. Get rid of the Raider name. It's a very contentious name, but just Chippewa Wildcats. There you do. You've merged the two schools and then bring two things together. So
simple done.
Simple done, but that's old politics, right? Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, and we'll get back to Chippewa in a bit because it won't go away. It's unfortunate we lost George Maroosis
at 77.
Yes.
It's interesting. I ran into the former CAO of the city, and we were chatting about old-style politics.
Dave Linke?
No.
Which one?
Jerry Knox.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. So we had a great conversation. He's doing well. And we talked about then and now. And you and I have had this discussion about the effect of social media and how that plays a role on politicians. And then you look at George, and he obviously talked to people and listened to people, but he did his way. And for those who remember, Merle Dickerson, another transitional political figure. He did things his way. He got things done, and people loved him for it. But then, as evolution happens, you can't keep doing criminal stuff, and you get caught. And so it's the old style politics, and it's interesting to watch the dynamics of this council. You got new and old, and that's what people wanted. And I was at City Hall today, and I was talking to some staff, and they're pleasantly surprised how things are working out. So you and I are getting older.
We are, so.
And we're depending on the younger people to fill in. Is their politics going to change differently from the era of George or Merle Dickerson? So from a journalist perspective, are you seeing a change?
Oh, definitely. Definitely, because there's an immediacy to every comment. And you see yourself in the mirror reflected back by social media and the constituents and what they're feeling. Whether it's a very accurate measurement, because social media is very limiting, really, on the people involved and the vocal ones. So you kind of get the wrong idea, maybe, of what's going on in the city. George, he had people stopping in and talking to him every day at his store. So he had a really clear understanding what people were willing to say face to face. I think today's age of politician they're reading the temperature on Twitter and their Facebook groups. It's a little bit different. I think maybe they get a little bit distorted vision of what's the temperature of what people are thinking, but also as soon as they say something or react to something, they get an immediate feedback.
Yeah. Which
might scare people off from being genuine.
It's almost like polling, instant polling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And is that good or bad? Sitting back from being an educator, armchair politician now, it's disappointing seeing the board. And this is not just the Near North, but all boards are now they've moved through their communications office. And as a journalist, you have become so frustrated trying to get answers to questions, and you got to go through the communications officer, and you can't directly talk to the politicians.
Yeah.
Whether it's their board governance or whatever. And I find that disappointing because you're elected, you represent the public. You should be available to the public. And I think that's the direct cause of social media, because there are people out in social media that like to make up things, and I get the reason why you're trying to narrow it, but I think it's hurting democracy as well. And George was always good for a quote, and
he was always
nicknamed
accessible. Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest change, Dave, is accessibility. And whether it's governance from the council or the board policies, is that you're not, even though social media has direct access, it's not the same.
Mm-hmm.
So as a journalist, are you frustrated that you can't get direct questions? You can't call up, like you could call up George or walk into a store and say, George, what do you think of this? You can't do that anymore. Or it's limited.
Well, my role has changed a little bit, so I haven't been frustrated because I've stopped doing a lot of that, right? And when I do need to talk to someone, usually I can get a hold of them and talk to them off the record or something like that, but it depends on your relationship with the person outside of their rules within the board, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know the people on Near North School Board very well.
No one does.
Yeah. And so
you elect them, but you don't know who they are, or you can't talk to them, or you got to go through the chair.
Yeah, so I have stopped doing that, and I feel for the other journalists that have to go through those routes, because you don't get a really good, a real good feeling for what the elected officials are thinking. And to cover the meetings,
they're not the most exciting things.
That's a lot of time commitment. Yeah. Like you can find out a lot more in a 5-minute coffee conversation with somebody than you can sit and. It's more economical to talk to them after the meetings, almost, because during the meetings it's so structured. It's a waste of time, almost.
Yep. Really. So with George's passing, and you've got, let's say, you got 5 councillors that are old school, and then you got 5 councillors that are new school. Is that the beginning of the transition of how things are being done?
Well, Mark King's is accessible, but maybe he regrets it sometimes.
Yeah, well, and that's, I was interested.
Did you follow his comments on the fencing?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That was the first thing that came to my mind. Are they trying to keep the students in or keep the homeless people out?
I have to say I was surprised that was the solution.
$600,000 fence?
Well, no, it was more than that. I thought it was 800. No, maybe a 7-Eleven. Yeah. That's money that could have been best used for something else that's more directly in the classrooms. And if you read the comments, and as soon as the city or they announced, it wasn't the city, but who's the organization that not community services, community services, but they announced that they had bought the building or were going to transition. I said, that's going to be a huge DSAB. Thank you. Yep. That was a red flag right there. And if I was the chair, I would have sent the bills to the DSAB saying, hey, you're costing us.
Do you know how they made that decision?
No.
It was terrible. If they really put a microscope on it, what happened was they were actually, they tendered for potential places for that in the city, and then they changed it, and they had to make a decision in 3 days because there was funding. It was a window.
Oh my God!
And it was one of those
follow the money.
One guy talks to another guy, who has the lease. So you got Mark, Vic, Jimmy, and we got a building.
Here's the money.
Here's the
You got
money.
to spend it in 3 days.
Nobody's thinking about the impacts, where
Yeah.
the building is,
Yeah.
and what, you know, and it might have been a good decision in the long run. I don't think so. There's other places where they could have done
Yeah.
that, but that's what they chose, and it had a real ripple effect.
Well, and it's going to.
So it's a process that they did. I don't think they followed the right process, but now they're in for long-term lease.
Sounds like Greenbelt, and it sounds like Ontario Place.
I don't know. Like, I'm sure that somebody crossed the T's and dotted the I's.
Yeah,
but,
no, I'm sure everything was above board, but yeah, the
it was a
rationale.
bad decision.
Yeah.
If you were thinking long term,
Yeah,
because the impacts to the schools.
and I know they've
and the
lost
other
kids
things.
because of it.
There's a ripple.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I was a
Smaller
school,
gain all the kids.
yes, exactly. Yep, absolutely. I was talking to a number of teachers. If I was a school board, I'd be sending the bill to for DSAB saying this is what it's cost us, even though there's one taxpayer. So so you go back to our conversation as old style politics, and whether you love Vic or not, he gets things done.
Yeah, and this is a matter of something got done real quick without
Yep.
some long-term thinking, I think.
Yep. So is that the old style politician, and what's the new style politician? Are they going to vet and think about things, and the wheel keeps spinning because they can't make a decision? Is that the difference between George Maroosis and a new councillor? Are they so worried about too much consultation and not getting anything done, or going ahead and making a bad decision for the sake of getting something done?
Yeah.
And so is that maybe that's been the same for politics, the last 50 years?
I think as long as things are done transparently and the long-term impacts are considered, how it's done just needs that open public ability to look at what's being done. So they actually had, and they have a very good process for public meetings when there's cities spending big bucks and making changes. There's some transparency there. You have a public tender process where everybody gets a chance. That's already established. But for this particular thing, that wasn't followed.
Yeah.
Right.
And like you say, it's the long-term ripple effect. And if you had consulted the school board or even the senior citizens next door, I'm sure you would have got a different story.
Or the other school down the road.
Or yes,
right?
the French Catholic, yeah. Well, and their board offices are right there.
Now, this might sound silly, but there's another way to look at it. This is part of life now. Mm-hmm. There's no way of hiding that anywhere in the city.
No.
It's going to impact one
NIMBY,
neighborhood
right?
or another. You're near an armory. There's a school. I think, and I've said it sometimes kind of flippantly, but somebody ODing outside your school is an education opportunity.
Yeah.
Like that's real life, right? You can't shield it. You can't hide from it. You can use it as a learning opportunity. I definitely would be if it was my kid was there. It's like, okay, that's what happens when you don't do your math homework or something stupid like that. That's what happens when you start taking drugs. You don't know what's in it, and all of a sudden you're hooked because you don't know what you're taking. Or you OD if you got tainted drugs, right? Excellent education opportunity. Yep. That's real
for
life.
The seniors,
right in front of you.
For elementary, I wouldn't say that.
Well, why not? They've seen this stuff on TikTok.
Yeah, true. Good point.
Right?
Yeah.
Like grade 7 and 8s are like 9 and 11
Yeah, I'm
and
thinking
12s
like the
before.
kindergarten and like down the French Catholic school.
Well, that's a little much.
Yeah.
That's a little much.
But no, you're absolutely right. It is a little, and certainly.
But if they're young enough to determine their gender.
Yeah.
Right? This is real life shit, right?
Yeah.
You can't hide.
Times have changed, Dave, since we were young.
You don't hide anything from kids anymore, and you try to let them know exactly what's going on. So what's the difference here?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so who would have thought? Well, there are some schools fenced, but not completely fenced. Mm-hmm. So it certainly is eye-opening, and I don't have an answer to the homeless or the drug addiction. It's an issue right across this country in North America. And so
I was just talking to Rod Biltz before he came in, did an interview, and he's working on with some groups looking at trying to make legislative changes so that there can actually be they can address the issues, because one of the impairments of addressing mental health issues, addiction issues, is legislation for human rights that you can't force treatment. And there's a lot of times when the person's mental health and addiction won't allow them to make good decisions for themselves. So what are you going to do, right? So they're trying to get to the root sort of impediment of dealing with an issue. That needs to be done a little bit with more focus. I think they're on the right path.
So are you saying that we shouldn't have closed the psych hospital?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, we need a facility. Apparently there's capacity at the hospital even and other places, but because there's a doctor can't force somebody
Right.
for treatment because of human rights, so they don't, right?
Yep.
The police can't force somebody with their situation. Holding them without bail is against their human rights. But just having a turnstile at the police station and the courthouses doesn't help in anything, right? So everybody's trying to be cognizant of the human right of the individual, but that's not helping the individual.
Yep. Well, it sounds like a conversation in my mom. History keeps repeating itself, right? Things keep going around and around and around. So, so old style politics, they're still having to deal with the same issue. It's how they get to deciding the issue, I guess. And how
I think in the new style politics, what their challenge is going to be is, and that was one of the reasons why we're going to talk about Sheldon there as well. The issues of how to get along seem to be more important than the actual getting things done and getting along.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't know how many more people microaggressions seem to be a big thing. It's part and parcel to people having to deal with each other in certain ways, right?
Yeah.
And if you hurt someone's feelings with your opinion, you're now in contravention of codes.
Yeah.
Right?
Ethics and codes, yeah.
I don't think people are going to want to say anything to anybody. And some people think that's the right way to go. Let's have a world where everybody has to be very nice and careful about what they say. But I don't think you're going to get the root of any problems.
Or get anything done.
Because you're going to end up with inquiries and investigations on commentary between adults, right? I think there's a fine line, and I think people should, handle themselves professionally and with respect, and you can go over those lines.
Yeah.
But I think it's pretty blurry right now.
The pendulum is swung
a little bit.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But we're privileged white guys, and it's kind of hard to.
Yes. Well,
we're both very sensitive to that too, right?
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. I had this conversation with someone the other day, and you and I have had this conversation about the new wave of East Indians coming into North Bay particularly, and we equate it to the 1950s and 60s with the Italian immigration coming. It's the next wave, and I said, wait till we have our first East Indian councillor. Again, it's the transition of this community, and I think the diversity in our community says something, because when I went to high school, we had one Chinese family and one black family. That was it, and that was in the 1970s. Yeah, and things have changed, and I think they've progressed, because that's how you evolve as a community. But that's going to be the next stage. We've had our first Italian mayor, MP, MPP, councillors. So I think the next stage will be East Indians, and again, how will the community respond to that?
Yep.
And that's the evolution of democracy: is that you're changing to represent how your population is evolving. And young people versus old people, it's the same thing. And our biggest concern as older people is, we've pissed off the younger people. Are they going to remember that when they decide the future for the seniors, or are they going to be
don't depend on my kids' generation for taking care of people like myself when we need it.
As my daughter Abby has said, well, I know where I'm putting you, Dad, so I'm just giving you the heads up.
Yeah.
So at least she's being honest. She goes, "This is where you're going."
So, you better have a life planned out for yourself.
Exactly. So, because she's not coming back to North Bay. So, but since in the last 30 years, has North Bay changed? And in some aspects it has, and in some aspects it hasn't. And I was having this conversation with someone this morning, and we still have those cliques.
Mhm.
You know, until the older generation dies out, you know, not in my backyard. We talk about, you know, building a homeless shelter. You know, no one wants it in their backyard. Everyone agrees it's a problem and needs to be addressed, but not in my backyard.
Mhm.
You just have to look at the civic property where I live. It's been sitting vacant for how long? Because no one wants it developed, and well, a couple people don't want it developed. So some things have never changed, but with the new generation of politicians, will it change?
I don't know. It seems like it is, but I tell you, I was talking to a politician that said this council is worse than they remember.
Really?
It's fractured, right?
Because I talked to staff inside City Hall.
Well,
And
the
said,
staff probably like it.
well, they thought going in it was going to be bad.
Yeah,
but they're pleasantly surprised. So there's that. So we talk about social media. There's that perspective, outside perspective, and then there's that inside perspective.
Yeah.
Who's right?
Well, all I know is that when the bureaucrats are happy,
Yeah, good point.
other people might not be.
Yeah.
There's got to be a happy medium there somewhere. But
So what is the measurement, Dave?
getting things done, addressing issues, that's
Okay.
the measurement. Right?
Yeah.
So effectiveness is dealing with issues and get things done.
And that's never changed.
No, that's always the constant. That's the measurement, right? If everybody on council is real happy and the bureaucrats are real happy, I'm afraid possibly not enough's getting done.
Okay, so in the first year, what's the report card from a journalist perspective?
I think a little bit of a lost year, actually.
Well, the first year for a number of them.
Yeah, and
The honeymoon's over.
the second year will be the telltale. I think if I was doing an analysis, I would focus in on the second year to see what they've been able to do after getting to know each other, dealing with their initial issues. They some of them came in with some camp ideas, and they found out that they're on their own. And
That hasn't changed. That never changes.
no, that's always been the same, right?
Yeah.
So you have to find that out in the first year. So I'd be really lenient in judging a council in its first year. I don't think they had an exceptionally great year, but not a bad year compared to some.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
The first year
Maybe
of
like in Sudbury.
2014 council with Sheldon as deputy mayor, that was terrible, right? That didn't work out very well. Sheldon's was budget chief, but there was no confidence. Al went ahead with his own plan.
Yeah.
And he ended up giving away the golden goose with the hydro to pay off, right? Like that needed a full council sort of. So that was probably the worst first year I can remember.
Right.
Maybe. I don't know. They haven't had a whole lot of strong councils.
No. And why?
Well,
Are people afraid to run? Like,
Al had 3 years, right?
Yeah.
3 terms?
yep.
His first year was, I remember when I graded that, I said, okay, I'm going to give it to you because that was a hard mix of counselors, a lot of newbies. It was a tough beginning. Second year, I'm like, well, you don't have that excuse anymore. And third year, he shouldn't even ran, I think, because he didn't want to, he was not going to run. He decided at the last minute to run. But Sheldon was running, and I think it was Gary Gardner, right?
And the deputy mayor at the time, what's her name? Oh my goodness,
Tanya.
No, it was the other woman in the last election.
Well, that's
Oh, sorry, yeah. Okay, my senior moment.
Yeah.
Yes.
Actually, yeah. You know what would be a good idea to go through and actually see what actually got done, what the tax increases were.
Is that the measurement? Is that the measurement of a council is tax increases?
No, it's just one factor.
But that's what people talk about.
Well, the thing is if you don't raise taxes and you don't invest in infrastructure, then the next councils have to deal with it.
And as much as I love, the late Jack Burrows, 000, those subsequent councillors paid for it because, the infrastructure wasn't getting replaced. So
The stand was like that too.
yeah.
If you come in with
It
zero,
sounds nice.
it sounds nice, but you don't get
It's
much done.
electable. Yeah.
It just gets pushed down the road. So the councils that have been putting money into infrastructure, whether or not it was the right places in the city for infrastructure, At first, it seems like it was the Pinewood, Nipissing Junction, all that money that was put into there. It seemed like maybe not a good idea. But if they end up with a new hotel down there, if they do their community center down at Omichelle, maybe that starts to make more sense. But that's money that's spent up front that you don't get. That whole area won't get developed for years.
It's the same as the waterfront. Remember when everyone was mad at Jack for spending $20 million on the waterfront, and I was one of them. And now I'm going, you know what?
It's a deal now.
It's a deal now.
Yeah.
And so, again, listening to politicians, you know, how much faith do we put into them, you know, with their vision? And, you know, it's easy to criticize them, but then you have to sit back and say, okay, you know what, I was wrong. This is a smart decision. So you know, you look at when we were looking at closing high schools, and some of us were saying one high school. Well, if we had known what the city's plans were for West Ferris, and, you know, again, who knew that you would have had influx of immigrants coming into North Bay, because that's what school boards are based on. You can only make decisions based on the numbers you've got today and sort of slight projections. But where is North Bay? How are we positioned? And so, again, investing in the waterfront, investing in West Ferris, Pinewood Park, around Canadore College, they all sound like good investments. But how do you measure that? And as a politician, again, when you're going to get reelected, it's, you know, what have you done for us today? You know, here's the plan for the future. Well, you can't vote for the future. You go, whatever. That's how voters are, right? So my question to you, David, who's the George Maroosis on council today? Is there a George Maroosis? And it doesn't have to be a guy, obviously.
Well, you know what? Tanya has the potential for being a George Maroosis, where she'll have enough institutional knowledge.
Not Mark?
Well, Mark's a special case. I like Mark. He's a friend, really. You know, once in a while we have a beer. I drop by his place once in a while. I've always encouraged him not to run. Enjoy your life, because this is not necessarily there, but he always keeps doing it, and he has a compulsion to be involved and do things.
That's his dad.
Yeah, and
dad instilled that in him. So
yeah, so, you know, lots of respect for his willingness to do it and attempts to do it. I'm not sure how effective he is. I think he's a hard worker and whatnot. Here we go. But going forward, because I think this is his last term, so that's why I'm not saying he would be in the George. The future George might be Tanya if she keeps it up.
Right.
She's a hard worker. She learns. She's learning. She's getting better. I didn't really have a whole lot of faith in her at the beginning. A little bit too much of the bill thing happening. But if she sticks around, Gary Gardner's a thoughtful guy. He gives things. I think he's getting an idea what he can and can't do as a counselor. If he sticks around, he could be that if he learns the ropes and the history of the council. But he hasn't been around North Bay as long and as deep as ties. Again, another person that's not going to run again is Mac Bain.
Well, he said that before. He said the last 2 elections.
He's promised this time. He said this is the last time.
Oh, my goodness.
He said this is the last time. And he has a value that he adds as well. I think he could be more outspoken. He'd have to speak up more to be a George at the right time, even at the end. But I think he's a little bit sometimes too focused provincially and that kind of stuff. He likes that level. But yeah, no, Mac, who else is there? See, Mac and King, I think, aren't going to be there for the next election.
Right.
I think they're done.
So we're in a transition now.
Again, yeah. There's going to be some spots opening up.
So, again, there's, you know...
Oh, by the way, you guys are welcome to tell me I don't know what I'm talking about.
By the way, I'm not running either, so I just want to put that out.
I was going to put that question
I'm
to
not
you.
running at all. I'm done with that. So I like being an armchair politician. Yeah. But for the future, we have a lot of potential. We've always had a lot of potential as a community. But again, politics drives that. And, you know, I was talking to my mom, you know, whether you like Vic or not, he's doing for North Bay what other governments have done for Sudbury.
Mm-hmm.
When Vic or whoever else was in opposition, we always got shunned.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's our turn now. And so Vic is doing what he's elected to do, is bring stuff to North Bay. And you can't argue with that. Is that old style, or is that just part of the political game? So
that's how it's structured.
Yeah. Yeah. And when the goose is good, you know, it's you like it, but when it's not, then you're going to complain. So
speaking of the federal election coming up,
is there one coming up? 2025. Jeez.
Yeah, I know everybody's saying 2024 now.
The NDP can't afford it. They're in a good position. They don't want to give it up.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Well, their leverage is with the Liberals that need them, but you know, I don't know. It all depends on how things go this spring, I guess.
Well, I don't know. So you're going to ask me, you know, is Nipissing prime for a Conservative?
Yeah.
Well, Jay got in with how many votes? 17 votes?
Mm-hmm.
Anything's possible. First of all, as a disclaimer, I have no political affiliation.
Mm-hmm.
I was a Green Party, and I've lost interest in the federal Greens, so I have no home. But looking at that, you know, is it what we don't want, or is it the fear of something versus I got to vote for this person to keep this person out? Is that what it's going to come down to? And we all know who we're talking about is Pierre versus Justin.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, it's the American style politics coming into Canada. And I have thousands of American relatives that I don't talk to everyone, but I have a lot of them, and it's scary down there. And are we seeing that version of politics coming to Canada and even in North Bay? So people are finicky, and it goes back to my question to you, Dave, is, you know, what is the measurement? Are people just simply tired of Justin? And not thinking through what the consequences are? Because this is what you were saying, is what are the consequences if we vote for this guy?
Yeah.
Or not voting for this guy?
Mm-hmm.
Are people really that engaged? And we talked about earlier, and this is what I was talking to Linda, you know, what is the right information? And as a journalist, that's got to be difficult. Like you guys have a target on you, because I was reading Ian Hammansing from CBC on Twitter this morning, and he was being criticized. They said, well, who told you to report that? And he says, well, no one's ever told me how to report. And as a journalist, I'm sure you had that.
It's so insulting.
It is.
Yeah.
But people think that. And this is what blows me away, is that, oh my God. Well, there's a couple of reporters I can, you know, in this Toronto Sun I can think about. But in most part, reporters report.
I was with the Nugget for 18 years. Wrote a lot of columns. I am not a right-wing guy. And everybody thought for some reason I was. I'm not sure if they didn't read my stuff. Obviously.
They just read the headline and then they went to the next one.
Well, I was never told what to write and what not to write. I knew that the newspaper owners and whatnot, the newspaper owners were right. I was the left-leaning thing that helped balance it out, I thought, for much of it, even though I've been hard on some left-leaners as well. But when people say, well, you guys just report what you're told to report, you know, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Right? It's just not, that's not the way it is. But.
So has politics changed? And has journalism reporting changed? Is it the chicken versus the egg? What has changed? Is politics changing, so that means journalism is changing? Or is journalism changing so that politicians have to change?
I think psychology of people is changing.
Do they care?
Well, they care, but they're given too much information and too much choices on that information to really understand it all. And they don't have time or the...
well, some have. Some of the conspiracy theories that I've read going, you got too much time on your hand, buddy. Like, where are you coming up with this?
Okay. So the psychology of people, I think, is changing with the social media, right? I'm not sure how to articulate that or whether I see some studies showing that people are hypersensitive about things. They have poor attention spans. They're fixated on one side or the other because they can only understand one, right? Because there's way too much information and they can't diffuse which is the right information. Yeah. It's hard to have long-form conversations with people, especially on social media. It's like, I win or you win.
But that's what, come back to George. George was all about, okay, what about this? You know, I'm not totally against it, but have you thought about these things? Is that the discussion that we're missing in today's politics?
Right.
It's you just hit it on the head. Either you're right or you're wrong and I'm right, vice versa. There's no middleman. There's no middle.
Yeah.
Is that what's changed?
I think people are less likely to and less motivated to be that voice of saying, well, hold it a second. We're not thinking about everything, because you get attacked by both sides.
Yeah.
Right. So it is very polarized, and the people in the middle are considered the enemy for some reason. Centrists are considered wrong because they're thinking about two different things at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I just put it in the newsletter. I'm not sure if you read it. It was like, the problem with the world is that the people that don't know anything are very confident, and the ones that know a lot aren't as confident.
Yeah.
Right. And that's,
or they're afraid to say something.
Or they're afraid to say something.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of people that are afraid to say what they think.
Yeah.
I have
silent majority.
Silent majority, and they don't want to be quoted on it. So you don't have that. The people that are willing to quote are the ones that are certain about something.
Yeah.
And they're polarized.
So that begs the question: is that the type of candidates we're getting? I don't. The smart candidates, potential candidates, aren't running because they don't want to go up against that stuff.
I think maybe so.
And it's nothing against the current elected. You know, I'm not saying that they're dumb or anything, but I think there's a lot of other people that would come out of the woodwork, but chose, hey, I don't want to deal with any of that stuff. I'm just there. I want to get stuff done.
Yep.
And all the other stuff is messy.
And I don't want to have to worry about being, in breach of a code of conduct, where I was just being myself and respectfully in disagreement. You can't be respectfully in disagreement these days.
Yeah. Yeah. The art of diplomacy and discussing issues, you know, there's the far spectrum is, you know, of the old days of Merle Dickerson and Don King and yelling at each other. And even at the Capitol in Washington, where the two of them, the Union and the Senators, said, "Stand up! I want to fight you now." Okay, that brought me back. Okay, that's the old days.
Yeah,
but you're not going to see that.
No.
So again, the pendulum is swung way out. Is it going to come back to the middle where let's just get the damn thing done? And hey, we've talked to enough people. We know what the issues are. Okay, where's the compromise? Can politicians compromise? Is that old style, new style? And that's what George brought to the table. You know, I'm sure you covered council so many times, and your name, the wrench, was appropriate because he brought that thought. And if George had been involved in the decision about the shelter on Chippewa Street,
exactly,
would have happened. It may still have happened at that location, but there would have been more thought put into it. And so, do we have that George Maroosis on council today? Is the next MP going to be, you know, how different from Anthony and, you know, or Vic or whatever? Is that what the next evolution of politics is going to be? Or are we going to go back?
Yeah.
To the old style?
Well, what I do hope in the future, we end up with a situation where somebody is free to articulate their position. Others are free to disagree.
Without party influence.
Without party influence. And then those two can actually find some common ground and work together without polarizing the situation. Because each's perspective have some value. Comes down to school curriculum and how to handle what the school's real role is supposed to be.
Yeah, learn civics in class.
yeah, more civics in class, a little bit less other things. Or both at the same time, but with parents involved. I think parents should be involved. Like, okay, let's get right to it. Should a parent be notified if their child is making life decisions at school, with as far as their pronouns, how they're perspective, how they're treated at school, how they're addressed, and whether, like, at what stage should the parents, and what's the role of the teachers in that situation? I'd hate to see.
That's a loaded question.
Yeah, like, it's huge, and I'm very cautious about talking about it. I think a parent should be involved.
Okay, so, and Linda and I have had this conversation, and we've got we have a number of gay family members, and I don't think, first of all, if a student has to go to school to tell a teacher their sexual preferences, they don't have a relationship with their parents. Because if they had a relationship with their parents, it wouldn't be going to school. And I think that's where a lot of kids are forced to go to school, because that's where they feel safe. They don't feel safe to have this conversation in their own home. So I think that's where, so to answer your question, yeah, parents should be involved, absolutely. But it should be at home. But so then as an outsider, why is a kid having to go to school to feel safe to say to a teacher, I'm gay, or I want to change my name, my pronouns? If they have that open dialogue with their parents, I don't think it'd be an issue.
As a person who was a parent and gone through a divorce and with other issues in the family,
right. The dynamics now changes.
The dynamics are very much different, right? I think if a student says that I don't feel safe at home being myself and saying things, then obviously you got a children's aid situation.
Yeah.
Those are the people that deal with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Also, should it be done at the school, or should they be referred to a like North Bay Out Loud?
Well, the school,
right? Like, why is it put on the teacher?
Yeah.
Why is it put on the teacher?
Absolutely, and that's a lot of pressure. The answer is the school has always been, through time, has always been that place for a kid to go to feel comfortable or feel at home. They've made a connection with teachers, and they're able to do that. The school seems to be that safe place, and that's not all for all kids. We've known a number of circumstances of exploitation by teachers and stuff, but I think the school as a unit is a safe place for kids to go, and have always been. And teachers, and I talked to Linda. Linda is a teacher for 25 years, another teacher. You know what the biggest change in the school system is? The parent. The parent has changed over. You talk to any teacher, and I would say 99% of them are going to say it's the parent that's changed. And, whether you have parents that are more involved or less involved, it's always the parent that's been changed. And so is that good or bad? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. But the school always seems to be the place for kids can go. Linda started up one of the first clubs for kids to be safe at West Ferris. And they went there. There was a reason why that club was formed, because the kids wanted a safe place. So I guess that's my answer to you, Dave, is that there's other kids there, and they feel safe, that they can go and talk, and they have a special relationship with a teacher that they can talk to them about. So to your question, though, that's a lot of pressure to put on a teacher. Absolutely. That's above their pay grade. For all the crap that they're putting up with now, they should be just focusing on teaching.
Yeah, but there should be trained professional counselors for that.
Yeah,
role.
but there's no money for that.
Well, that's the problem.
Yes.
That is where the problem.
Teacher says that you should go down to counseling. We've got a counselor that's special for that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There should not be put pressure on a teacher that has no training or formal training in that area. But that's what happens. And we've all had a teacher that we know going through the education system. That mine was Mr. Colcock at Chippewa for cross country, and you build a relationship with that teacher. And I don't know if you had a special teacher that stood out for you, that you could go to. I think every kid has that. I think the majority of kids do. And I think that's why the school becomes that safe place for people to go. But again, my answer is, if the kid has a good relationship, open relationship with their parents, then it's not an issue.
Yeah, well,
but yeah. So it's
sometimes with teenagers and others, the problem isn't the parent.
Yeah,
it's the teenager's own mental health issue.
Yep.
It's a perceived lack of safety. It's maybe there's some reputational bridges that haven't been crossed, but whatnot. But that's not going to solve for the better by them not being involved with something that's so important. Yeah. My preferred route for this type of situation would be trained counselors at school.
Yep.
Working with the student, nothing changing until they get to a certain point, and the counselor brings in the parent before they start changing the pronouns, before they start whatnot, and it's done with the best attempt at doing it the right way.
But simply legislating, saying that you must talk to a parent before they change pronouns is not the answer, and I agree with you.
I don't agree with that either.
That's the heavy-handed of a politician and caving into.
There's no cut and dry here.
No, that's right. You know, again, Linda and her colleagues, you want to identify future criminals? Talk to a teacher, and they are pretty sure they can identify what kids are going to go in through the penal system.
The maladjusted.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's where the education system should be funded for teachers to say, hey, this kid needs some help.
Yeah.
Needs some serious help.
Yeah.
And that's where politicians lose focus and they only live for today. They don't, again, we talk about the vision down the road. They don't think about that. Well, what if this kid is doing this in school right now? He'll be selling drugs or sexually assaulting. Why aren't we dealing that now?
Well, actually, that's funny you mentioned that, because when I was talking to Rod, one of the reasons why he got involved with trying to figure out the homeless addiction and other problems, he was talking to a mother of a child. At 15, they got into trouble for the first time, went down that road, and since 15, they've been in jail every year, and now they're 35. Had it been dealt with originally, well, if there was some type of intervention then that worked, some type of counseling, that would have saved our system 20 years of dealing with this individual who might now be too far gone to save because of addictions and drugs.
Again, it's the short-sightedness of a politician. Let's fund these things up front and deal with them, because I bet, like you said, Dave, you go back over 20 years, what did it cost for that one kid if we had just spent $70,000 to hire a counselor?
Exactly. So I think that's the better cure for the situations that's going on is more counselors availability for young kids.
Yep. Well, moving social services into a school.
Yeah.
You know, okay, so you don't
taking it off the teacher.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I'd like to see. It shouldn't be the teacher having to deal with all that.
Well, the biggest complaint
stuff
is, oh, this kid doesn't know how to write or read. Well, you wonder why, because the teacher's dealing with, you know, kids with learning disabilities or learning challenges and still trying to manage a class. No one is superwoman or superman and we complain that kids don't know how to do the basics. Well, you wonder why, because they're only being taught maybe 5% of the time and the teacher's dealing with other issues. And again, politicians are losing focus of the future and they're just dealing with the immediate. And so that comes back to the voters. Is that, you know, educating the voters? Is that what the voters want? Well, then you better vote for people that have that belief. But that's not. People don't take the time to figure that out.
Interesting parallel with municipal politicians and investing in infrastructure so that it's not put down the road to the next guys.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's great. Campaign election. I'm for 0 tax increases.
Yeah.
Well, that's what people want, but they don't think of the big consequences. Holy shit. And look at Sudbury now. You know, look at the tax increases. I heard a conversation on CBC. You know, are you going to pay 6% increase? For what? Well, you're paying the piper now because someone didn't have the fortitude to say, you know what? And I got criticized for, you know, supporting one school. But that's the vision of the time is you don't have enough students. And this is, and so I guess I'll summarize. The conversation I had with Jerry is we don't have politicians that, can I say balls?
Fortitude
to make a decision and stick to it, whatever the consequences are.
Yep. Yep.
And so is that old style, or are the new politicians caving in and don't have the fortitude to do that? To make a stance on a long-term vision and stick to it no matter what. And will people buy into that? I don't think they will. People live for today, not for the future. They keep saying, what about the future? But they're more worried about the next year, 2 years.
I think a big indication of where we're going will be the next municipal election, when we'll find out how many of those people that were on council run again.
Yeah.
And how many new candidates are not old white guys.
Yeah. 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 Well, you look at the Conservative nomination, it's a female. I think we're right. I'm not saying that it's her, but I think, the makeup of females, I think, is important. And visible minorities is important because it represents the population. So I think before the
I would argue with that, push back and say a more feminine approach than a masculine approach.
I always wondered it's someone. I saw a Scottish politician.
You and I both have feminine sides and whatnot, and that helps us in certain things and nurturing and empathy and all those other things. But not. We also have a masculine side that deals with things a certain way, right? So it doesn't really matter to me what sex they're born.
No.
And I don't believe that just because if she's a woman that she's going to bring feminine qualities to political leadership. Yeah. Because some don't, right?
Yep.
So a more balanced approach no matter what for whatever individual that runs.
So with that in mind, is North Bay ready for a female mayor? Are we ready for a transgender councillor, East Indian councillor? Have we moved? And then we're talking about, and the gist of our conversation today is politics and the old style versus new. Mm-hmm. Are we ready for a community? Is our community ready to move on to become that diverse? And with George's passing, I wouldn't say he's passing the guard on, but he's one of the most relevant in the past that most people understand. And it's always easy to look back after someone's passing, but he had a role and he did his role well. Do we have future politicians that are going to be able to do that? And I think every council needs one. And that's why I asked you, who's the current George?
Know what? Lana.
Yeah, Lana hasn't spoken. I haven't seen.
She's had a rough first year.
Yes.
I think she'll have a better second year.
Yeah. And I think that's why I voted for Lana as well, because I've known Lana for a long time, and she's passionate about issues that are very important.
And she has a lot of institutional knowledge. Yep. She knows the city very well.
Yep.
I think, if she stays for another term and she asserts herself the way we know she will, I think she might be.
The question is, can you get, it's always been the question, can you get more done as a politician or behind the scenes?
Mm. Yeah.
And I think that's where you're going with some of these councillors going, I'm getting frustrated because I came in with this grandiose agenda and I can't get anything done because I don't have 4 other votes.
Yep.
And that sort of, well, you promised to do this, and that's why I voted for you. Well, people have to understand the dynamics of council. And so again, with the passing of George, is old style politics gone? And, what is it going to be like? And who's going to be the next George that we can drop into their store and say, hey, George, I'm having problems with my sewers. Can you do anything about that? And I don't think that happens anymore, because I don't think councillors have that power. And the same with school trustees. Your powers are limited on what you can and can't do. You can be a voice, but you can't promise change.
Ministry of Ed pretty well dictates everything you can do, right?
Absolutely. Funding. Which is frustrating, because I still believe in local politics. I still think there's a purpose for local politics. So again, old style politics, is it gone?
Well, provincially, they've tried a whole bunch of old style politics and just forced issues on municipalities, and they're fighting back, and it's backfiring on them.
Absolutely.
So the power needs to be locally.
Yep.
Because we've seen what happens when the province tries to dictate things. It blows up, right? So the move should be the same for the school boards. More individual power for the school boards.
Yep. Oh, I agree. But how do you, how do you best use that? And that's the problem is.
Did you pay any attention at all to the provincial Liberal debates in the election?
No.
Me neither.
All I was laughing at was that Andrea Horvath got booed at the Grey Cup game. She was the only one that got booed. I go, Hamilton, she's the mayor, and she gets booed. And she's the only politician that got booed. So what does that say? But no,
Hamilton's about the most redneck place you can imagine.
I have to admit, though, I'm a Mike Schreider, a Green Party supporter of Ontario.
Yeah.
So I didn't pay. I've on the peripheral. You got some of the small guys saying we don't need a Crombie because she's a Doug Ford light red.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting this weekend. No, the end of the month, Dave, with the Kitchener Centre election.
Okay.
With how the Green Party candidate's going to do. I think the NDP and I like the leader what she's done so far. I think the next election will be very interesting if people have long memories, and how the NDP and the Green Party might surprise some people. I think Vic is still safe here, but will he lose his power and influence if things change at the premiership? But again, it comes down to. But to your point, before the municipal election, I think there's going to be the federal election, and I think that's going to be the telltale of which way people are blowing. And if they're going to stick with Justin, they're going to hold their nose and vote for Justin because they don't want the alternative. And I think that'll be a telltale for city council as well.
Interesting. Okay, well, we got to wrap this up.
Yeah, I just want to shout out to Monoghan Greenhouse, where I volunteer.
Okay.
They are doing amazing stuff. The Nipissing First Nations, they got this greenhouse that they're pumping out hydroponic. It's just amazing initiative, and I give them credit for.
What are they growing there?
Lettuce, arugula, herbs.
Is it for sale anywhere?
Yeah, well, it's first for the band members, but the problem is they're selling it to restaurants, and they're sold before it grows.
Oh, wow.
And that's how progressive and successful they are. So they've opened the third farm, which is all shipping containers. So it's those initiatives that I love in our area. And again, it's the progressiveness of the next council is, will they allow us to move forward and ideas like that? And will we be accepting? That's politics.
Yeah. Well, it's nice catching up with you.
Yeah, it's good seeing you, Dave.
Thanks for coming.
And thanks for not having a target on myself.
Hey?
Thanks for not having a target on me this time.
Well, just wait. Right on. Well, thanks for tuning in. Hey, subscribe to the Back in the Bay magazine. The winter edition's coming out. I need some support. Okay, bye.